All right, good afternoon. I want to thank MORPC and President Murdoch for having us here today and for being such a wonderful partner in the LinkUS initiative. In partnership with MORPC in Franklin County and CODA, Joanna Pinkerton and I are here today to share a preview of the findings from the State of Mobility report that's going to be released next month. The report looks at where we are and examines opportunities for the region, taking into account all the great work that has come before us, such as the Insight 2050 work that was led by MORPC. Before we share some of the key takeaways today, I want to provide a reminder of the LinkUS efforts currently underway so we can see how all this work is connected. Next slide, please. You may recall that LinkUS is really our growth strategy. It is a transformational and comprehensive prosperity and mobility initiative for all of Central Ohio. Our region is growing. In fact, according to the latest population estimates released by the U.S. Census Bureau last week, Columbus is one of the nation's fastest growing large metropolitan areas and the fastest in the Midwest. You all know from previous MORPC studies that by 2050, Central Ohio will be a region of 3 million people. This region is growing and changing in significant ways. The question is, are we ready? What are the challenges, and how do we prepare our region for these challenges moving forward? Next slide. As part of the LinkUS initiative, we are focused on a number of corridors, as you see here across the region, based off the Insight 2050 corridor concept study. Currently, planning is underway on the east-west corridor and the northwest corridor. We are looking at both infrastructure and coordinated growth opportunities as we build out these plans. As we are bringing the community along with us as we map out these initiatives, we want to thank those of you who have participated and given us your feedback and provided us with insight along these corridors. We see LinkUS as an opportunity to transform mobility to be more inclusive than ever before, which is absolutely necessary for a sustainable, economically competitive, and equitable region. Next slide, please. Advancing the priorities of LinkUS and the priorities of our region will help address our current and future challenges. These 6 priorities include equity, workforce, affordability, economic development, innovation, and sustainability, as you see here. While we know there is a lot of work to be done in these areas, currently there's a variety of efforts in our region being led by many of you to advance these priorities. Next slide. Critical work such as LinkUS will help drive equitable growth and will provide desired outcomes. As we look at all of the work occurring throughout the region, the connectedness of all of these efforts becomes apparent. LinkUS, housing strategies, and other initiatives work hand in hand to tackle our short and long-term challenges. It would be hard to be successful without the success of everything on this screen. For these reasons, the LinkUS process developed a State of Mobility report as a starting point for highlighting the role of mobility in achieving our desired outcomes like focused growth, health equity, access to jobs, and quality affordable housing and transportation choices. I'm now going to turn it over to my friend Joanna Pinkerton, President and CEO of CODA, to give us some insights into the report.
Thank you, Director Gallagher. As we move on to the next slide, I want to acknowledge the concept that Director Gallagher shared just a couple slides ago. You saw that it's time for us to address 21st century challenges. And you may have noticed on that slide, there was a statement that said, if we want to experience different outcomes, we need to do something different. And I'm sure that when each of us ponders this, that makes sense. But we're at this really interesting time where each of us in our roles, throughout Central Ohio, have an incredible opportunity to position our communities for equitable social and economic prosperity. But that takes us acknowledging that the way we've grown and the way we operate our infrastructure is not always leading to prosperous outcomes for everyone. So I'd like to share a few takeaways from the draft State of Mobility report. The report was commissioned to better help us define the why. Why we should be reimagining our investments and why we should be repurposing our existing infrastructure, specifically mobility infrastructure, for better outcomes in our region. The data in this report affirms some existing and ongoing efforts in the region and it identifies transportation needs where we can harness those opportunities for the future growth projections expected in our region. There's a lot of data that underscores foundational matters, which are critical to understanding mobility trends happening in our region. We're talking about more than just transportation infrastructure maintenance needs. We're talking about really the human side of the engineering, how the investments should be leading to inclusive human outcomes. So on the next slide, slide 7, please. So we all know that this is a really critical time for our region, and that the growth we're experiencing is going to give us a chance to actually change how we connect and reconnect communities. We all know that equity is a vital issue tied to access housing, jobs, healthcare, education, and our region's really cool, incredible cultural destinations. So you see a map here in blue. So this is a slide where the Kirwan Institute at The Ohio State University defines opportunity index. So what does opportunity index means? This is the result of 5 categories where 15 socioeconomic data indicators are compiled. The 5 categories are transportation opportunity, educational opportunity, employment, housing, and health opportunity. And so what is this particular map showing us? You'll notice that the areas of lowest opportunity are primarily low income and also minority communities. Notice there are some areas inside of 270 in the northeast, the south, and also west of downtown in the lighter color. Lighter color is less opportunity. The significant impacts of historic housing and transportation redlining are still being realized generations later. They've created physical and economic barriers, which have resulted in the creation of underserved communities that we still see today. Where we saw deliberate redlining and we saw denial of access to housing finance, you couple that with the effect that the highway network had, we created a lot of situations where people lack opportunity to housing, education, health, and the arts, the indices that you see here on the map. This data also shows us that socially vulnerable communities have higher rates of individuals living with chronic disease and can result in shorter lifespans. And even though mobility cannot single-handedly reverse chronic disease, it really plays a role, whether it's promoting a healthy lifestyle where the market's a short walk away, where healthcare is accessible, where shared mobility is available, or where single occupant vehicles passing through could be more environmentally sustainable and not be contributing to the double-digit increase in air pollution that we're seeing in Central Ohio right now. If you'll move to the next slide, I'd like you to check out some of the data takeaways here. This is a little shocking considering the current economic growth and success in our region. Our most vulnerable communities spend a higher percentage of their income on housing and transportation. I think most of us know that, but what are the numbers behind these issues? According to the Housing and Transportation Affordability Index, the average household in the Columbus metro area is spending almost 23% of their income on transportation. In some neighborhoods, that escalates to 28 to 30% of household income. 38,000 households do not have access to a car. To drill down on that number a little bit, more than 7% of owner-occupied households and more than 13% of rental homes in the Franklin County area do not have access to a vehicle. So 1 in 10 homes do not have access to a vehicle. Think about that. 28%, so almost a third of households are at or are approaching what HUD defines as cost burdened on the housing side. So this means a family who pays more than 30% of their income, their disposable income, for housing. So they're having difficulty affording things like food, clothing, transportation, and medical care. So do the math and couple the housing burden of 30% and then add on another 20 to 30% for transportation. We could all benefit from more efficient and more cost-effective transportation, but the cost burden households are even more likely to need affordable transportation options to offset their housing burden. So communities with the least amount of access to opportunity are also prone to more dangerous road and intersections. An astounding 65% of crashes and fatalities occur on only 10% of the streets. 250 miles of roadway are in these type of areas where a high number of crashes and transportation-related injuries occur. And much of this mileage is located in our vulnerable communities. And just as importantly, we need to continue investing in transportation and recreational options such as the Fast Five that will increase access to parks and greenways, which improve public health and improve placemaking. So the statistics shared in the mobility report really tell us that we have an opportunity to address socioeconomic opportunity collaboratively through mobility options. If you can transition to the next slide, please, I'll share a little bit of the how. So some key takeaways is that our dispersed job centers make it more difficult to serve all employees and employers with multimodal options. The majority of our jobs take more than an hour and a half to travel to from a low-income neighborhood. In the current form, you're really at a significant disadvantage if you cannot afford the maintenance of a car. And it's a real conundrum, especially in the Midwest. No job, no car, no car, no job. And so employers are really beginning to feel the strain of employee turnover and applicants not being able to reach their job sites. So continued investment in transit, multimodal options, shared mobility, and then pairing that with equitable growth strategies of development can really help us mitigate the issues and provide more opportunity for everyone moving forward. You know, I think we're in the midst of an incredibly exciting time in our region with the growth that's happening. And this really is a generational opportunity for us to reimagine how to connect our communities with our infrastructure. When we get this part right, we're really going to change the dynamic of how all people and companies can thrive in our region. So I'm going to turn it back to Director Gallagher now, who has some closing comments on the state of mobility and the LinkUS corridor progress.
Thank you, Joanna. Joanna did a great job at laying out the data. Now the question is, how do we use that data to create equitable mobility options that really address these challenges and make investments for the long term? And here's a picture that you can see that shows just an idea or an option of how this may look for us here in the city or in the region. We need to drive innovation and think differently and enhance mobility systems for our region. Unlike some of our peer communities, our region has the opportunity to confront these challenges before they become too difficult. We can get ahead of these issues. We have a roadmap to drive equitable and sustainable growth for our region and to be intentional about driving greater prosperity for all of our residents. Next slide, please. The time is now to make these investments to achieve our desired outcomes for innovation and enhanced mobility systems in our region. The mobility report that we've talked about today talks about the why of this work. LinkUS is about much more than the map of the corridor shown a few slides ago. It is about creating a whole system of multimodal networks, including transit and safety improvements that all connect together. We will keep you informed along the way as we work collectively as a nation, or as a region to establish the what, which is our next steps. The what will identify priority networks to determine what investments make the greatest impact for our region. As we continue this work, we look forward to the future to determine the how, the implementation strategies. CODA's planners and team are working on transit options, and at the City of Columbus, our planning team is focused on changing the way we approach zoning, housing, and development, and how we reshape our mobility infrastructure for the 21st century. I encourage you all to visit the LinkUS webpage at www.linkuscolumbus.com. Media. Thank you so much for your time today.